Hello, I'm Fallen and this is Automation. Recently I have noticed there's quite a bit of movement along my old engine build guide, so I thought I should make a new one, an updated one and an actual one. Since the old video was more of a joke that, well, there were quite a few nice, good pointers, at least I think so, they were good, at least for beginners, but still, it was a very, very subjective way of, my way of building, as the title suggested. But enough rambling about reasons. The facts are, well, the building was updated quite a while ago, and, well, you can consider that previous guide outdated, even if you valued it for some reason. So yeah, let's remake it. Let's make a new one, and it will be aimed at beginners. Let's start with basic controls. I remember when I picked up this game for the first time, I struggled with, well, moving around maybe not the menus, they are quite straightforward, but with the camera movement. As of now, I am using mostly the mouse, and that is the right mouse button to, well, circle around the build, and the middle mouse button to move to certain parts that I want to take a closer look at. You can also use this panel here. It does basically the same. It resets, it loads different profiles. You can do all you want from this panel too. Okay, I am lost. With that out of the way, we can move on to the most important part of designing the engine. That is the understanding what you are picking and what you are picking it for. As you have noticed, I completely reset the designer here, so you will be greeted with the screen like this one here. The name you put right there, but it is not the important part. The most important options you have to pick there are the engine familiar. This one should be matched with anything you want to build. So if you are building 60s car, you should go with 1960s like this. So yeah, this one jumps by 1 year, this one by 10 years. Other than that, this is one of the most important settings when you are starting to build new engine, because it defines the technology. Next up is picking actual parts for our engine. I don't want to delve into what different engine does. I can assume if you picked this game, you already have some interest in whole automotive sector, so you will be familiar with what inline 3, 4, 5, 6 is. It basically shows you how many pistons the engine has, and in effect how much power it potentially can output. So if you want something very powerful, you are going with V16. Oh, this is the part of the paid DLC, so not every single one of you could have access to it. But yeah, in short, this should be your pick of choice. So if you want to do a boxer, you go with boxer. If you want to go with V8, you go with V8. These two picks, they vary in the actual size they take. Okay, let's now move on to the block material. It's like the name says, it is the block material, quite literally. It defines out of what material your engine will be built. So it defines the weight, the overall reliability. I will tell you later on what I mean by that, because this statistic isn't here. It is later on when we will be tuning the engine, but it is the power density stat that is quite important, and it is affected, if I recall correctly, by this section here. So if you're going with higher end engine, you will be needing some higher end block material like billet aluminum or some composite like magnesium. Oh, this one will be the best out of the bunch overall. But also it will be the most expensive. For the sandbox builds, it is not important at all. I am not doing any campaigns in this game. I don't really like it, so yeah, I don't want to delve into that right now. So For sandbox purposes, you don't look at any of the stats like prestige or production cost, material cost. You just do what you want. The only exemption is if you do any challenge you set for yourself or for somebody else, like the build that costs tops $5,000, then you will be looking at these stats here. That is the material cost and production cost. It will change your overall cost of the build. So yeah, the cheapest one should be cast iron, but that is not important here. We should be moving on. Okay, for the purpose of this build, I will be going with V8 engine. The one part I have left out here is this box here. I am not going to talk it through very much because it is also concerning only in the campaign, because it summarizes your costs, overall costs of the engine, of the production units, and so on and so forth. I am not going into that. It is not important for sandbox purposes. Next up, we've got the family capacity. That is the overall capacity of our engine. And the family capacity, or the overall capacity, is split into two sections. One is right here, and the other one is later on. I will show you that. It basically defines the overall capacity of your engine, as I said before, so you can set it for family here, and there's also a engine variant, so you don't need to create completely new engine. You can take the old one with this bottom end parts. So the quick rundown of picking the appropriate capacity for your engine is you have to consider the engine bay size. So the engine cannot be too big because it will not fit into your build. It is quite common when it comes to the vanilla bodies in this game. There's quite a few ones that can fit really big engines, like I don't know, 10-liter V8. You can fight that by, well, fiddling with the bore, that is how wide it is and how narrow it is. If you make it narrower, it takes much less space. As you can see, the engine shrinks quite a bit. And when you change stroke, the engine size doesn't, the actual physical size doesn't change, but the capacity also changes. So you can make a higher capacity engine that takes a lot less space with this setting here. But there's few more things you have to take into consideration when building the engine at this part of the capacity, and that is the bore and the stroke are meant to be used in correct way. What I mean by that is, if you are going for, say, high RPM build, you will be going with low stroke, because the higher the stroke, the more stress will be put onto the engine. So if you have high stroke, you won't go with anything fancy in terms of RPM. But in exchange, as it states here, it gives you much more power and torque on the low RPM. So if you are going for like old V8 build or something that is close to diesel, that is the torquey build, that doesn't do much RPM, that is the way to go. You are going as high as you can with the stroke, and well, you are trying to lower in exchange the bore. Also, it comes to the tuning here. If you didn't set any particular capacity, engine capacity in your mind when setting goals for the build, you can tweak it later on in the engine variant section. What else I should mention here? That is the bore. The wider it is, the more valve float you will get, and it is quite common issue when building any powerful engine in this game. So you would need to, well, fiddle with it and find the sweet spot for your current build that gives you as much power and not much issues, so you can squeeze everything out of it. And for the purpose of this guide, I will be staying with 6.4 liters V8 engine that is made of magnesium, 92 mm of bore and 120 mm of stroke. That is quite a stroker here. So we won't be making much RPM. I will show you just that. Next up, we've got head and valves. That is quite straightforward, honestly. Pushrod is mostly for the old engines. You won't be using it on any new build. If you don't want to, of course, you can pick it if you like. But it reduces power. So, like you can see here, max RPM is quite low, so it would be nice for our build right now, but don't be mistaken here. It can lower your engine and power output even more. So if you want to squeeze everything out of your engine, you will be in need of picking something that is more efficient here. That will be, of course, a direct acting overhead cam or overhead cam, single overhead cam, or dual overhead cam that gives you the most of your engine capacity and is most commonly used in high RPM builds. So if you've got lower RPM and you for some reason care about the weight and cost of the engine, you go with overhead cam. This one is also outdated. It can be an option sometimes, but generally overhead cams are better because you can pick how many valves per cylinder you can have, and this directly influence the power of your engine, the max power you can squeeze out of your engine. So yeah. Another thing that is quite important here, but not in terms of automation by itself, but when it comes to exporting the car or the engine into the BeamNG drive, this setting here affects the sound of the engine. So pushrod will sound different than overhead cam and dual overhead cam. I think the amount of valves sometimes changes the sound of the engine, but I am not 100% sure here, so don't quote me on that. Last option here is the head material, that is the gasket, head gasket, what it is made from. Of course, the better material will be better in terms of weight here. It doesn't change much when it comes to performance, because it is not a moving part. It doesn't affect the engine directly in any way. It just weights you down and changes the cost. So for the most part in Sandbox you will be going with what's the lightest or what is most fitting for your picked topic, theme for the build. If you're going cost effective, you're going with something cheaper like cast iron. Yeah, that is mostly your choice. And here is the part I was talking about earlier, the other setting that allows us to fiddle, fine-tune the capacity of our engine. As you can see, it doesn't change the actual size of the engine at all. Yeah, so we can squeeze a little bit more of capacity out of the same engine block size. We've got 6.4 liters, and as you can see, it doesn't change anything here when we go up to 6.6, but when we go here to 6.6, the engine grows, and that is how I use this setting here, mostly because I don't do many variants of my engines. And of course you can use it as fine-tuning later on when you build the actual engine, the full engine. You can change the capacity on the go, you don't need to change everything here. Also, there's another part and main reason why I've picked the V8. V8 engines are, as of now, the only ones, the only engines that can change the type of crank you can use in the build. You might ask, what does the crank change in your build? It changes quite a lot, at least theoretically. Why? Well, crossplane cranks, that is the common one, is most commonly used in, more torquey builds. So it provides a lot more low-end power, low RPM power, compared to the flat plane crank that is different layout of the crank. I don't think it is showed properly here. Maybe it is. Not sure though. Doesn't matter. What matters is this one gives you a lot of more torque, low-end torque, This one gives you less torque. It is even visible here on the settings here, but is more reliable when it comes to the high RPM. At least it should be this way. Also, it changes the actual sound of the engine in the testing area and also in BeamNG Drive. The flat playing crank, well, it sounds really sweet, and it is the crank that is used in most modern muscle cars, if you are interested in that. So right now let's go with billet steel heavy flat plane crank. It should be top of the line. And also other things you have to consider here are of course the weight, the cost and such, but it comes to your builds really. To make this more comprehensive, I should say these three parts have something in common. That is, they affect the overall engine reliability. I said earlier about the bottom end parts. I think I said that crank is top end. That was my mistake. Sorry. It is of course bottom end, also conrods and pistons. They all affect your overall engine reliability, as you can see here. And basing on what you are planning to do with the engine, with the car, you should pick parts here accordingly. So we are going right now with some torquey builds, so we are going with top of the line here. Also, we should pick same or similar for conrods. That would be the forged heavy if we are not going for RPM at all, or titanium if we are going absolute top of the line. That is that weights the least and gives us the max output on torque and RPM. If you are going for something more RPM focused, forged light would be enough. Also, it is quite light and cheaper than titanium if you are concerned by that. If you want something in the middle ground, you go with classic forged or cast. It also is quite light. The torquey builds are weighted much heavier. That is to be considered because the parts have to endure much more strain. And it is almost the same when it comes to pistons. You pick the part that is most well fitting your build. So forged light or something like forged heavy and so on and so forth. There's also another statistic that is not on the others, that is the emissions, but it is also concerning only when it comes to the campaign. It is statistic used only in campaign, so yeah, we do not need to worry about that here. Oh yeah, and here the best for torquey builds will be forged heavy, and there isn't anything that is good overall. As you can see, forged light is quite weaker, so yeah, we are going with forged heavy. Last option here, the balancing mass. It is quite important. There will be another option right there in some engines. Right now we don't have it, but it's all these three options work basically the same. This is meant to balance our engine. It's supposed to make the engine more reliable, but not without any drawbacks. So as you can see, easily see here, as it is stated, less balancing mass means higher throttle response. It comes to the fine-tuning here, because in some builds you can have quite a lot of balancing mass, and it might be needed for engine to work, because higher balancing mass means more reliability, but lower throttle response. So you have to find your golden spot here between reliability and throttle response when it comes to the balancing mass. For most of my builds, I am going with either no balancing mass at all, or even cranking it down to make the throttle response even higher, or going with harmonic damper when the engine dies, wants to kill itself, and I am going to 0 here, because it still does much more than this setting set to 50%, yeah? So this is worse than this, remember that. So yeah, right now we are at top end, and that is the compression setting, cam profile, springs and lifters. It should be much easier from now on to, well, leave it as is right now and do other parts of the engine, finish them. That is picking the fuel injection and such. So I will pick some random parts right now and come back to the top end. And with some random parts picked, you can see our engine wants to die, really wants to die. It doesn't want to work at all. In fact, there are few ways to solve this. One is lowering the RPM limit to this point here. It states how much RPM it can withstand, our engine. And we are going to do just that for now. As you can see, the engine works, but it is not very powerful. Fix this graph here. Okay. As you can see, we'll be doing max of 3300 RPM. That is not very much, but we are quite torquey, as I said before, yeah? Longer stroke means much more low-end torque. But let's say we want to make much more in terms of RPM. Let's say we go up to 6000. The engine obviously will not work. What can we do about that? Well, it is quite simple. First of all, we can increase the balancing mass. So right now, at least the engine works, as you can see. The other thing we can do is, remember what I said earlier. The flat plane crank is much better when it comes to low torque builds, but high RPM. As you can see, we've got quite a bit of torque on the low end, so it will not work very well. That is why we are switching back to crossplane, and our reliability, well, almost fixed itself, almost. The other things we can change here is making some parts lighter, like the crank itself. We can go to billet steel, as it has higher stat in RPM, so it should do better in higher RPMs, and as you can see, it is doing significantly better. Same thing we could do with conrod. I think, yeah, changing the conrod also affects the other parts, as you can see. The crank. Why? Because it is part of the whole composition, let's say, yeah? So if you make the whole thing lighter, it will withstand more power, basically. That is why forged heavy wasn't very good pick here. It is quite heavy. This one is 50%, almost 50% light. I think picking forged light here would increase it even more. Yeah, right now we could go even to 7500 RPM and not make the engine blow up. But obviously we need quite a bit more of fine-tuning here, and we'll be moving to that soon. When we solved all the reliability issues, the first reliability issues, we should, before tuning our engine, we should move on to well, restrictions and fix them first. So yeah, I am postponing talking about compression, cam profile and such to a later time. Right now we want this engine to work, so we'll be needing quite a few things changed here. Usually I am making the exhaust much larger than it should be even. As you can see, we've got another issue, that is the knocking, and very likely we should just change the either the intake, or we should just lower the compression for now, and it should work, and it doesn't want to work for some reason. Okay, the heat right now is the issue, and okay, I can see where the issue is right now. So if you ever have issue like that, you can also make the header bigger so it doesn't overheat that easily. And I think we should be able to get back to the original compression too. Yeah, that is a matter of fine-tuning the engine right now. As you can see, it works. So yeah, when you're building anything, you can right away either change here the headers to whatever you want, or just leave them as is and make them larger, because they basically do the same thing. So they make the airflow easier through the headers, changing this part here and changing the actual header size. Also the headers, changing the headers changes the overall look of the car. So the higher end ones will look much better, like these ones. Yeah, let's go with tubular arrays. Okay, now we can get back to the top end and what we do here. When it comes to compression, it also affects your aspiration type. What I mean by that, if you're going naturally aspirated, you can crank this as much as you can. It is object to fine-tuning too. That is quite a bit of work here. And if you are going with forced injection, forced intake, you are going to need some lower compression. That is for sure. Okay, and piston is dying for some reason. Yeah, you need lower compression, and there's also a few things you need to change here when it comes to the turbo itself for the car to work. For the purpose of this guide, I think I will go with naturally aspirated, because fine-tuning turbo takes a while too. You can also use the AI generation to make it work instantly, but it mostly destroys everything you just did. So bear that in mind, that using presets changes every setting you have on the car. With the AI ruining everything I just did, I need to bring it back to the spot we left on, and we can move on to next part. When it comes to compression, I will be going with quite high on. It changes the fuel economy. It uses much more octane, so if you go higher compression, you will need better fuel, like 98 or 100. Unleaded mostly. If you are going for some special builds, you can go nitromethane. Is one of the best ones, or methanol, or there was also compressed gas. I didn't really use it in any builds of mine. Also there was something, yeah, in one of the old builds there was some fuel that had like 200 octane. That was quite insane. But as of now, the best fuel here in terms of performance will be nitromethane, and well, it is easily noticeable how much power just changing the fuel gives us. Sorry for jumping around the builder here, but everything is connected with everything else basically in this game. So yeah, like I said before, it is spreadsheet simulator, and if you change one thing, you have to change other things too, most likely. So when you change compression, you have to change fuel and so on. But feel free to pick whatever fuel you want for build you are making. So if you want something insane, you can go, of course, nitromethane. So when setting the basics, the random things here, as I said before, just pick whatever you are aiming for your car to be using, yeah? So set it before and then fine-tune the car accordingly, so it works. When it comes to the cam profile, it can be quite tricky to set. As you can see, we've got estimated peak torque here. We can use it as a point of reference. As you can see, if I lower it, I get so much power, but generally you set it to where you want to be ideally. So we've got tops 7,500 RPM, so it should be a bit lower, like, I don't know, maybe this is the point where you can pick whatever you want. If you are going for something high RPM, you are going to be picking sport or race setting. If you are going for something lower RPM, you are going to be somewhere between normal, low, or sport, depending on what's your top RPM. Generally, you can pick something around 1,500 or 2,000 lower than your RPM limit. So let's do just that. 5500 as a reference, and we will be tuning the car around it. Springs and lifters. This is the part that mostly fixes all your valve float issues in most of the builds. As you can see, when I lowered it, the engine failed instantly. So yeah, this also changes the throttle response. If I remember, it is not stated here, but it should really change this throttle response. So yeah, if you are going for a high cam profile, you are going also for stiffer springs and lifters. Otherwise, it will the valve float issue will be present. And you can fix it also by adjusting the cam profile. If you lower it, the less valve float you will have. The higher cam profile, the higher valve float you will get. That's how it works. When it comes to VVT, well, for some builds you want to use it, for others do not. It is also personal choice. It increases overall power, so if you are min-maxing the engine, you are going with VVT all cams. If not, then you can go with only on intake or without any VVT at all. We don't have VVL on this engine, sadly, but it works like I don't know. You might know how VTEC in Honda engines works. That is basically it. It changes the cam profile to something different on the point you set here. So if you set it at 5000 RPM, you get VVL at 5000 RPM, and then you can change the cam profile to max, for example. Yeah, so we've got 35 cam profile here, but when you set VVL, you can set the cam profile to even 100, and it will be a jump in, probably, potentially, if you tune it right, it will be a jump in torque and RPM, sudden jump. That is why the Honda owners love these cars so much, or at least I was told so. The fuel tuning. This is also very subjective. If you want the most power, you're going with a direct injection per cylinder. If you are going with something more realistic, it will be either single point EFI or multi-point EFI, and here you can change also if it's per cylinder or if it's single. Most modern cars, I think, have single point of injection here. And when it comes to older builds, you will be left with only carb for most part. So yeah, the least efficient will be single barrel, low power engines. The most efficient will be either DCOA or 4-barrel, and of course quad carb or 4-barrel twin carb. These two give mostly the most power, as you can see. The DCOA on quad carb gives more power than 4-barrel on twin carb with my current tuning, but it can change with the slider changes here. So yeah, you have to fiddle with that. There's no way I can explain everything to you in a single video, and this one goes on, I don't know for how long. I'd say it will be like 20 minutes from the start right now, so that is quite long. So the fuel system changes the efficiency that our fuel is getting into the engine and mixed with the air and so on and so forth. Let's not delve into that. The intake manifold can be used to restrict the engine power. If you are aiming for something more realistic, you will be going with multi-point EFI single and compact. That is the standard box air intake out of the most of the cars. That is not fitting the such a powerful V8 engine. You can go with variable, you can go with race, every setting here changes the look of the engine too, and it comes it is similar to every engine in the game, every layout basically. So yeah, also going direct per cylinder will change its look too. Manifold size is well, changing how much airflow is going into our engine. So I don't think it changes anything visually, but it changes amount of air it gets into our engine. It can go both ways. It can ruin our engine tuning, and it can also make it more power. Before we go into these parts here, I should finish what I was doing right here on the fuel system. When it comes to the fuel map, it also changes few things. It makes the mixture of air and fuel richer or leaner, and it affects our throttle response. So richer fuel will make our car be more responsive to the throttle, leaner will make it worse, and it changes the amount of octanes we are needing in our car. Sadly, it doesn't show it here. Maybe it is in some menu I am not familiar with. I don't know. The way we can see how many octanes our engine uses is right there on the summary, if you ever were looking for it. Also, the game will suggest that we are not using all the octane we have. It is probably because we are not using it on the lower end of the torque, and we are using it on the higher. So we should change it by making the compression higher. And as you can see, we are automatically making much more power. So yeah, you are fiddling with fuel system and top end in exchange in between. You are jumping between these two menus most frequently when fine-tuning your engine. The last menu here is, of course, the exhaust system. Here we will have a few options. Of course, the headers, as I said before, you can set whatever you want here for the looks and change everything else accordingly. But if you want to fine-tune it, you have to use this chart here. As you can see, our exhaust is not restrictive. It is quite big. It is 83.2 millimeters. That is over 3 inch. Should we stay like this? Oh, this number was quite weird, though. Yeah, this one shouldn't be too restrictive because it lowers our power. It can even make the engine fail, but it shouldn't be too big because it also lowers the output for some reason, and it weighs more, so the car overall will be heavier. The other way of managing your exhaust is changing it to be dual. But keep that in mind, not every engine can be with dual exhaust, sorry. So you might want to set that when you are starting to build your engine. That is why I told you to skip through all these menus, pick whatever parts you are aiming for, and go with it. Same goes to the mufflers. For most of my builds, I am using at least one muffler because the cars get deafening in BeamNG drive. Some just do not want to sound well without them, so yeah, I am mostly going with straight pipe, you could say. Or with the baffled, that changes the sound completely, but also restricts our airflow more. But that is for more realistic builds. For this one, we can go freely with straight through, and as you can see, it changes our flow through the exhaust. So we will be needing of adjusting it. Okay, now the bypass valves work. As you can see, they also give us a bit more airflow here. So we should be fine. And as you can see, again, we've got some way to fiddle with our engine, the fuel system. But before that, I have to state that catalytic converter doesn't change much in terms of soundbox or exporting this car into BeamNG. It restricts our airflow and is used in campaigns of this game, so for most sandbox builds I am not using it at all. And yeah, the graph here, it shouldn't go into the wall like this, it should flow downwards at the end mostly. So if it goes into the wall like this, you know you have to change a few things in your build. As you can see, we've still got some restriction on our valves. Mostly we can change it by changing the cam profile that affect the valves by themselves. And as you can see, we are getting much more power of this engine. This is how you fine tune, basically. You go through these menus, you go, yeah, as you can see, we are almost restricted on the header, so I have to make it bigger. Again, we've got some unutilized octane, so we can go basically 100 on cam profile. We've got to change the lifters a bit. And we've got to make the compression a bit higher. And right now we are on over 800 Newton meters of torque and on almost 800 horsepower. And still we've got some restrictions in the engine, which we can easily avoid by making the intake manifold bigger. But it also changes our curve. It is not looking very well, to be honest, but I don't want to fiddle with that for too long. Yeah. And also, this is where the min-maxing comes. As you can see, I am over 800 horsepower now, 850 at the top end, and we are making 8000 RPM. You might ask, why did I do that when the engine isn't able to hold that? Well, for most sandbox builds, it wouldn't matter anyway. If you are min-maxing the engine to output max horsepower, max torque, and so on, you can usually be fine if you keep it under 15%. It shouldn't break. There are some rare occasions where export into BeamNG drive breaks when you have low reliability, but you can fix that afterwards by changing these settings back. So yeah, right now we are all fine. This would have a little or very high drawbacks when it comes to the campaign mode of this game. So in campaign you should be keeping it as low as possible. Best if it's at 0%, minus 0%. Earlier I was talking about the power density, that's the statistic that's affected by our engine family peaks, that is the block material and so on. Well, for this engine it is 505 basically, and it is theoretical max horsepower that it could take. Everything over that will lower the reliability of the engine, and basically it is used only in calculations for campaign. I don't think it affects exports to BeamNG drive in any way. As you can see, the engine works just fine. Yeah, classical cross-plane crank V8. And I guess it's time to address the elephant in the room, that is the quality slider here. In my builds, I am not using it, because most of my builds are realistic, so this doesn't feel very realistic as it makes the car cost quite a lot. It might be fine to use on some realistic hypercar build. I didn't do many of these, so I don't need them. And I think quality slider is quite a bit of cheating, as changing this to plus 15. As you can see, it changes quite a bit. It gives us some power. It removes any drawbacks we had from the reliability on the RPM and so on. We can also change it here, so it makes even more power. And you can easily see how it goes. Yeah, we can remove the balancing mass altogether, almost altogether, and have 100 throttle response. Basically, this car is becoming broken by that. Yeah, we can go like to 8,500, and if we add some basic balancing mass, we can go to 10,000 even. So yeah, quality slider basically breaks the game, but it can be used in min-maxing, as you can see, 2000 horsepower easily out of this engine. Also, as you can see, it also changed the amount of power our block can take. Yeah, see, this is what I said about when you change the block material, it has the different power density and different amount of power it can take. So magnesium is quite light, but it won't take much power. Same goes to this composite here. The heavier block can take much more power because it's basically on basing on cooling. So heavier the block, the easier it is to take all the heat that is generated in the engine that is working on high power. Well, there are quite a few things that I haven't talked about, but they are used only in campaign, basically, like smoothness, loudness, performance index, so I won't cover it here. It doesn't concern us in sandbox and BeamNG builds anyway. So yeah, this is the summary screen. It summarizes basically everything you did. So yeah, fuel economy, the power, the throttle response, the name of the engine. You can all find it all here, and still we've got some unutilized fuel octane, but it is due to me fiddling with quality here. So yeah, it is quite powerful setting. Okay, I think that is all for this video. It is quite long anyway, and I think I covered everything I wanted here. So for you, it might be easier to start your journey in automation without being overwhelmed by all these settings here. And it can be quite overwhelming without realizing how everything is connected to each other. So yeah, let's finish it off here. If you've got any questions, please post them below. If you've got any issues, if you found any issues, any mistakes I've made here, please do post them too under the video. I am free, I am open to talking with you on any topic really. As you can see, I've been answering the questions quite regularly, even under the older videos. If somebody watches it right now, my video from the year ago, for example, I will still read your comment and answer it. So yeah, thank you for watching, hope you liked it, and see you in the next one. I hope so.